Hello, class, and welcome to another exciting facilitation for this semester. I am Dr. Annie George, Department of Public Health, Faculty of Health Sciences, and will be your guide. Hope we all enjoy it. Thank you.
On today's discussion on topic 1, we'll be looking at Child Health PHS 311, Introduction to Child Development, and stages that are involved. At the end of this lesson, we should know the concepts of child growth and development, understand the principles and aspects of child development, and also know the stages of child development. Before we start with the concepts of child growth and development, I would like to ask who is a child? Because basically we're talking about child health. So who is a child? According to United Nations Convention on Child Health, a child is a person who is below the age of 18 years. So why are we studying child health? We're basically doing this to understand child growth and development because they are an important part of teaching and raising a child. No child is ever the same, even from the same parents, including identical twins. They are never the same in terms of their growth and development. I will also want to highlight the differences between growth and development. Often people misconstrue these two terms. Growth is usually increase in size, increase in weight, increase in height. That is what we call growth. But when a child is being discussed in terms of development, will mean the physical development of a child in terms of the motor functions, ability to use the muscles. We'll talk about the cognitive functions, the thought processes of a child, ability for a child to communicate, the linguistic skills of such a child, and then the social skills of a child, ability to display emotions and relate and interact with others. Those are things we look at. Those skills are what we look at in terms of development of a child. Activity 1. Before we continue with the next slide, let's ask who is an infant? Let's begin with an infant. So who is an infant? Okay, an infant is a child who is less than 1 year. From this slide, further down, an infant is a child who is less than 1 year. But looking at the concept, as we continue with the concept, you'll find out that progress in growth and developmental milestones in a child are usually age related, and it occurs in what we call a normal pattern. So when you understand the activities at each of these levels, it helps in guiding children in terms of their thought processes, their ability to use their cognitive functions, ability to interact, the social functions, and ability to use their motor functions or the motor skills. I would like to also state here that a neonate is a child who is less than 28 days of age. A toddler is usually ascribed to a child between 1 to 3 years. They are called toddlers because of the awkward way they walk at that age. Then you have the preschool child, that's a child who is 2 to 5 years of age. So what are the principles involved in child development? Like I said earlier in the previous slide, The patterns of growth and development are usually in a normal way and is usually universal, that is international or global, and is predictable and orderly. And these patterns of growth and development can proceed from head downwards, what we call cephalocaudal direction. Cephalocaudal in the sense that a child will learn how to control the head first before learning how to sit and before learning how to crawl and even to walk. So it proceeds from head downwards. It also proceeds from the center of the body outwards, what we call proximal-distal. A child's spinal cord will develop first from the center of the body before the muscles of the shoulders, the muscles of the arms, the forearms, and then the fingers. So it is orderly because a child will sit before crawling, will learn how to walk before running. They perform simple tasks before they get into complex tasks. Domains, different domains influence another domain. For example, like the language domain. Language domain has influence on the social skills. A child who is able to communicate effectively will know how to interact and socialize with people. Then we'll look at another principle of child development, which is called the maturation. The brain development and changes in brain affects the thought processes, the thinking processes of a child, and also the motor skills, ability for the child to use the muscles and play around and do other things. So brain development in a child. Look at the picture of a brain of a child. So this takes us to activity 2. At what age does rapid development of a child's brain occur? You can see the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe of the brain, the cerebellum, the brainstem, and the temporal lobe. At what age does rapid development of a child's brain occur? So here we are. A young child's brain is usually highly active, very, very active at such a young age. And they develop rapidly, especially at first 3 years of life. At birth, a child's brain will usually weigh like 0.45 kg and has links of neurons that develop rapidly after birth. So these links of neurons or neuronal cells, stimulating them, having sensory stimulation of those, of such a child helps the neuronal links to even connect more. And that helps a child, in terms of a child's development and well-being. So it is important that a child is stimulated and taken care of at early stages because that helps in the brain development and helps such a child, to develop faster. So what are the factors that can actually affect brain development in a child at such early stage? When a child is having poor or inadequate nutrition, trauma, maybe physical trauma as a result of injury, fall, or pathological trauma to the brain. Like when there is a disease that's affecting the brain cells. When a child has cerebral malaria, cerebrospinal meningitis, when a child has neonatal tetanus, when a child has septicemia at early stage, or some other infection that can affect the brain, that can actually impair brain development in such a child. When a child is under emotional or physical abuse by the carers, such a child can have impaired brain development. A child born in poverty, because such a child is deprived of so many things, socioeconomic things, can affect brain development. Exposure to environmental toxins like lead poisoning can affect a child's brain development. Parents who use substances, or when they are pregnant for such a child, a mother who abuses alcohol, abuses marijuana, abuses other substances, that can affect a child's brain development. So this takes us to aspects of a child development. There are three major aspects of a child development. You look at the physical aspect, the cognitive aspects, and the social aspects of child development. Now, these aspects, the development of these aspects are usually progressive. Its mechanism differ in terms of speed and pattern in different individuals or in different children that grow up in different environments. So environment and the gene such a child is made up of, affects how progressive in terms of the speed and pattern of a child's development. A child that is born in a socioeconomically deprived environment will not thrive as a child that is born in a well-to-do environment. A child that is born with some form of genetic disorder will not thrive as much as a child that is born pure. So every child, like I said, is actually unique in his or her own way in terms of gene and in terms of environment where the child grows up. So when you look at the aspects of child development, like the physical aspect, you're looking at the gross motor aspects of the physical child development. When you look at the big muscles, you look at the small muscles, all this take place within 15 to 20 years after birth. You have the cognitive aspect, which is the intellectual, the thought processes, the language, and the imagination of a child. Then you have the social aspect that has to do with the emotions of this child, the timidity of the child, the pleasure of such a child, and the interest that the child displays. So, from aspects of child development, we look at the stages of child development in terms of age of such a child. A child that is an infant less than 1 year will usually grow and develop rapidly at such age. And when the child gets into early childhood, between 2 to 6 years, growth is usually less rapid, but there is increased cognitive development at that age. Then when a child gets to middle childhood, between 6 to 12 years, there is rapid growth in height and weight of such a child. Then we'll get to a stage of childhood called the maturation in children, which is usually first year to 12 years. There is usually a physical and cognitive skill development, both developing rapidly at such age. And that takes that child to an adolescent stage, which is the teenage years. That is characterized by what we call the onset of puberty. The child begins to develop the primary and secondary sexual characteristics. A male child will begin to have what we call spermachy, development of sperm cells, and puberty, development of pubic hairs. Then the female child will have puberty, development of pubic hairs, and that will lead to what we call the telarchy, which is the breast budding, and then the menarche, which is the beginning of menstrual cycle in such a child at that age. So we've learned the concept of child growth and development. We now know the principles and aspects of and stages of child development. So in our next lecture, we shall look at assessment of newborn and common problems that they face. Thank you for listening.